playground. I am Danvers, your host, aka John Faust, and we are back with part 2 of our interview with Jeff MacKay of Captain Jack's Pirate Hats. Last time we talked about your journey and misadventures.
Yeah, and
with reality television, but I kind of bullied you into coming back. Because we're going to talk about so much other stuff.
It's a pleasure
today,
to come back, but the truth is I was so long-winded that you had to go for another session. So
look,
it's all on me.
Long-winded too, so it's totally fine. I love it, and I enjoy talking to you. And I think we're going to have some fun. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start. We talked a little bit about the haunted house thing and so forth. Talk to me a little bit about growing up and some of your influences in sort of that monster kid realm.
Sure. Well, I would, Friday night, and I can't remember. I remember hearing the Dr. Demento show, but I don't even remember if Dr. Demento was radio or whether that was television. But there was somebody that every Friday night, in any case, there was a monster movie every Friday night. Mm-hmm. And one of my childhood friends and I would sleep over, one of us at the other's house. Every weekend we watched a monster movie, and it was, make Chef Boyardee pizzas. Nice. And you didn't realize how horrible they were at the time. It was just cool to make your own pizza, and we would watch a monster movie every Friday night. And so that was one of the memories of starting that kind of experience. And I remember, Wide World of Disney didn't really have monster shows, but they did do the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, which we watched every Halloween. Yeah. Halloween, even as a kid, was it was right up there with Christmas. Always was, neck and neck. Yeah. The two holidays.
I'll tell you what, some of those Disney movies, when you rewatch them as an adult, I'm like, wow, this is really intense.
Yeah.
I remember one of my favorites was Darby O'Gill.
And the Little People.
And I mean, that was crazy. So anyway, but I digress. But yeah, we talk about Disney being like, oh, it's for kids, but
no,
got warped a little bit with some of that stuff.
Even then, I mean, for kids, you think of it, all of the shows had morals, and all kids show Bambi, the mom's killed. It's like,
oh yeah,
like everybody's an orphan. Everybody gets killed. Old Yeller, the dog, they have to shoot the dog. Everything was tragic in some respects, and we watched it as kids. Somehow we survived. I don't know. I think I'm not Gen. I was born in 1963, and 1962, and I just heard this the other day. We're kind of on the fringe because we're not. Some things place us as boomers, and other things don't. They place us as this little bridge in between the boomers and the next generation. But in any case, I'm from that last generation that, in the summer you left home after you ate your breakfast and you did whatever the fuck you did in the neighborhood with your friends, and you came home at 12 for lunch, and then you went back out and did the same and did whatever. Your parents had no idea what you were doing. They knew you were on your bike, your Schwinn bicycle, and you were supposed to be, right in the neighborhood. And we went to the far side of town. We went to abandoned houses. We went to railroad. We went to all these places then you just had to be back home at 6 for dinner. And then you go back out, and you had to be back in by the time the street lights came on. And in the summer in Ohio, that means 9:30 at night, so you're out all day and your parents don't know what you're doing. You drink from people's houses, from the tap,
the hose
outside the house, and you didn't worry about germs, and they didn't have we played in the garbage bins at the medical center.
Oh
We would
wow.
raid
Oh
the
my
medical
God.
center's garbage bins and dig through there and find all kinds of and at the time they didn't have all kinds of regulations about how they had to dispose of things. They didn't have
Right.
biohazard needle containers and stuff like that. You'd be going through and we would find bottles of pills, and we would make our own napalm with gas and dish soap and
God.
just all kinds of stuff that you can't even imagine kids doing. And I think we were the last generation that could get away with doing that, and
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
and do all kinds of Halloween pranks that we didn't get arrested for, honestly, that you
Yeah.
would now.
Yeah.
But in any case, taking tangents. So, starting out, I think Disney and the horror movies and things like that really interested me in they started my interest in makeup, because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, my favorite character as a kid was the werewolf. Well, the
Oh yeah.
wolf man.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I used to run around. My brother would be playing little league ball, and I would be running around behind the backstop and stuff, I'd skew my face up, and I'd run around with my teeth stuck out like this, and I'd be like, and everybody would, when you think about it, probably was like, that little kid's mental. But I was a wolf man all the time, all the time. I shredded my clothes, but I wanted to do some other things. I wanted to actually do the prosthetics. And back in at that time period, you couldn't just run to the party store and buy pre-made silicone prosthetics that
Right.
anybody can do now. There was no makeup. Like, if you wanted makeup, you would have to go from Newark into the big city. You'd have to go to Columbus, and you'd have to go
Mm-hmm.
to the theatrical makeup supply place down
Yeah.
near the Ohio Theater. There was a makeup that there was a place that had Bob Kelly and Ben Nye makeup, and you could get, in the back at those time, it was grease paint, and Bob Kelly had just
Yep.
moved into stick makeup that looked like a big lipstick for whatever color it was. You
Yep. I
open it up, and
remember it. I
very
remember it.
specific oily smell, and you had to take it off with cold cream and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. They hadn't gotten to water-based makeup yet that didn't crack. But in any case, so to make things like any type of mask, like I remember one Halloween I made a mummy mask, you had to use flour or wheat
Mm-hmm.
paste and tissue paper and or oats and paper towels and make up your own concoction. You just couldn't go buy liquid latex and
Right.
spirit gum. And I mean, I remember when I finally got a bottle of spirit gum, it was pretty cool, because you could go to the regular Rite Aid or whatever it was at the time, and you could get lamb's wool. They used to have this product called
Yep.
lamb's wool it was for stuffing shoes if you had bunions and things like that. Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Scholl's
Mm-hmm.
lamb's wool. But when you unfolded it, it was about 16 inches long, and you could spread it out pretty thin. So if you did your face and you went around the edge of your eyebrows with spirit gum, you could stick that lamb's wool to it, fold it back over your head.
Yep.
But at the time, you had to use like tempera paint or some kind of
Mm-hmm.
paint to make it brown, because they didn't even have brown spray
Yeah.
paint or brown
Yep.
hairspray.
Hairspray.
And so anyway, I think one time I actually dyed. I used Rit dye, and I dyed the lamb's wool and dried it out, and I
Yep.
glued it to my face, and so I did werewolf. But
I remember one Halloween. So I had Alan Ormsby's. It was one of his originally, like, we got it through Scholastic or something like that. And he would go through like the different movie monsters, and like in the back he would go through and, like,
here's how you can
use
do it.
makeup.
Oh,
Right.
cool.
And I had no idea what any of these products were. And he didn't talk. I remember he didn't talk about spirit gum. He talked about eyelash glue.
Oh yeah.
So you'd get crepe hair, and I remember going,
Oh
but
my
I mean,
God.
I didn't understand what eyelash glue was, so I'd be like, oh, it just looks like super glue. And I remember my grandmother being like, no, you can't do that.
No.
But then Halloween came around, and I kind of figured it out. And I got the eyelash glue, and I found the brown
That you
crepe
have to
hair,
unwind
and
and iron.
and I did the crappiest looking Wolfman ever. But I was like, that was my foray into like into the stage makeup thing,
Nice.
and I thought, oh, I'm a professional now.
That,
But yeah, it's crazy. And I remember like they would talk about, because you talk about spray paint and like they didn't have the hair color. They would talk about you can take like
Polish.
shoe polish.
yeah, exactly. Which then, when you get that on yourself, it doesn't come off very easily.
No. Oh, and we had no idea how to take the eyelash glue off, because of course I didn't think that far
Right.
ahead. So I mean, like my
You're
mother's
covered
saturating
you're covered
with cold
with
cream.
scabs of
It's crazy.
yeah, it was.
Oh,
So
my God.
that was, I mean, that was kind of what got me into makeup. That and Planet of the Apes with Roddy McDowall, the
yeah.
first one, and the Planet of the Apes movies. I wanted to do the ape makeup, so I did a form of my own face with plaster Paris,
Yeah.
and I used modeling clay and I sculpted the whole face, and I got a foam latex kit, which I had to send away for because you couldn't just go get it. And I, made the mold, positive and negative mold, and I baked it in the oven, and I came up with my own Planet of the Apes mask. And
See, that's so cool to me, because that's, you're not just buying something off the shelf, you're making something.
well, and usually even when now, I mean, like I was saying, now you can get all of that stuff. You can just go to Party Supply Store, or even easier, you can just get on the web and say Planet of the Apes face makeup or werewolf makeup or whatever, and there'll be 50 videos on YouTube of how to do it. And there'll be, if you want to get the stuff, you can just go to Amazon, if you want to support Bezos. But in any case, it's another one of those things. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I mean, it's true. And you kind of have to evaluate, like, okay, who am I? I think I split hairs. I'm like, am I supporting this little small business?
I have to.
Not that Ben Nye is a small
I have to
business,
justify my purchases and who I support to myself all the time, and a lot of it I have to weigh. I'm like, well, I'm making these hats for people, and they're going to be very happy with their hat, and it's going to give them so much joy going to pirate festivals and this being a part of their personality and all that kind of stuff. Is it okay? It's really okay for me to spend money patronizing these people whose businesses I don't really want to support, because I don't really support their overall umbrella of things that they do. But
right.
So and everybody has to do that for themselves, I guess. And I guess I should be thankful that I'm in a position that I'm cognizant enough that I can make that decision and that I can think that through. Because some people are not aware of anything and they just whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, sidetrack. But
no, I mean, I think it's an important conversation to have, because, when we look back at, like, it was impossible to find stuff, and now, we're saturated with, like, a click of a button and we can get anything we want for the most part. You kind of have to decide, well, where is that stuff coming from, and, like, what are my values? And I think it's an important conversation to have.
People today, it's just one of those things where they don't think, they're like, well, what am I trying to say? Not privileged. How am I? They're not spoiled. God, why can't I think of the adjective? Anyway, they they can get anything they want with no work, with no effort.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and they are spoiled. And back in the day, whatever day that was, but back in the day, you had to create that stuff. And so you were lucky if you could find a tutorial like the one that you were talking about, where they went through the monster makeup and then, or the movie monsters, and then told you, you know, how you could do. They half told you how you could do it.
Yeah.
But you still would have to do work yourself, you know, to figure that out. And now it's just, it kind of goes along with that whole thing I said about in the last episode when we were talking about Jack Sparrows and being a Jack Sparrow reenactor and being one of the first ones. And when I did it, I had to find and make everything for the thing. Now you can go online and you can say Jack Sparrow frock coat, Jack Sparrow hat, and of course I'm responsible for that too. But
right. But you know, but here's the thing: there are like many layers of that, because you know, there's that, you know, very shitty costume quality, and then that's one of the reasons why, like, I wanted to learn, and I showed you a picture of like
by the way, your outfit is wonderful. You have great outfit. Good job.
But like, thank you. I learned to sew, and I learned how to do that. And I mean, it took many years and many, you know, a lot of trial and error to like figure that stuff out, and a lot of YouTube videos. Yeah. And actually, when I started sewing, there weren't any YouTube videos. I just had to figure it out. And, you know, now it's kind of fun. Like, I don't remember how to do this, and you go and find a better way.
Right.
And, and that to me is one of those things where you kind of offset, like, I'm making stuff and trying to figure it out like I did when I was a kid. And that brings me joy. Of course, it also brings endless frustration, because you're like, this isn't perfect.
Well, that's because of the perfectionist in you, and I'm the same way. If I can't get things exactly right, it really bugs me. Whereas other people, you know, aren't that way. And one of the lessons for me that I've had to come to grips with over the years is that that's okay too, because and the lesson is for me to not be snobby about things. And I really noticed it because when I first started pirating, and I went away from the Jack Sparrow character, and I started doing my own clothing and my own stuff. I was kind of like, yeah, this is pretty great, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I would see some people that just got the costume out of the party store or whatever, Amazon, and they throw it on and they show up at Pirate Festival. And you'd hear people.
The foam.
And I was guilty of it too, because I'd be like, that's a yo-ho-hokey pirate, you know?
Yeah.
And then, then I was at some event. I had been doing my stuff for a couple years, and I was at an event, and there were guys that transitioned from the reenactment community into the pirate community, and they literally do all the hand stitching of all their clothes, bone or wooden buttons, et cetera, et cetera. And they looked at my outfit, my wardrobe, and they were like, you're a fucking Hollywood pirate. You know, you're a movie pirate. You're not an authentic pirate. Authentic pirates were sailors, and their clothing would be all. And so I had to think about that, and I was like, yeah, they're right. And they're doing the same thing I did. And lesson learned, don't, there's room for everybody in this if it's bringing people happiness and they're having a good time. And
absolutely,
it shouldn't be any problem for me with those people anywhere along the line, from, you know, the yo-ho to the guys that are above me in their need to be period correct down to the stitching of their wardrobe.
And, you know, we talked about me being, you know, doing the American Revolution reenacting last episode. And I kind of, you know, I was definitely heading down that road. But there came a point where I'm like, this is ridiculous. I mean, nobody even understands this but me.
Right.
So, and I for my pirate stuff, I love to take inspiration from, the Howard Pyle stuff, which we all know was not authentic.
No,
And then
he
you
was
take stuff from
he
movies
was
that
a
you
Quaker
like.
artist, and he
Right.
painted pirates the way he envisioned pirates.
Right. But like that's our
Yeah.
in our
Sure.
lexicon or
Absolutely.
zeitgeist or whatever I'm trying to say. But it's like, I like taking the stuff, the cherry picking, if you will, of the pieces that I like, and I want to make it look good and make it look good on me and have fun. But I know that most of the stuff I go out and do is pub crawling and taking pictures
Right.
with people. And that's fine. Yep. And like I do my little stupid videos, and hosting these, old pirate movies. But other than that, the stitch count, and if people find joy in that, that's great.
Yeah.
But me personally, that's why I make my clothing, because I would rather not do it than give my money to the James Townsend Ensemble.
Well, for sure.
So.
And it seems like a lot of those places, and
this is where I go off.
They're getting a premium price, and the question is whether the product that they're making is a premium product or not. And in particular, who you mentioned, their stuff, in my opinion, the quality of their product has gone down. I think.
And I stopped shopping with them a few years ago because I don't like their politics either. But
exactly. That's the other point. But yeah, I think they started, like a lot of places, they started having their stuff not made. They're like any business, most businesses, unless you're an individual artisan who's handcrafting something, they're looking for a way to improve their margin, and they find that they can find cheaper labor and cheaper materials elsewhere, and they have that done, and then they slap their name on it, their label in it, and so in any case, and like for me, I can't do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have. I put a logo in every one of my hats that's my name, and
it's such a cool logo too.
Well, it changed. The one from your vintage I just changed after 23 years. I just changed my logo to.
But it's like leather.
My
hat's over here.
I made this bowler.
Yeah.
That's the old logo, and the new logo is.
I may have to get you to make me a bowler too.
Let's see.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I love that. He's
different. This is what I like doing. I like when I get custom orders that are for things that I don't have in my normal catalog. And this is from Roman Polanski's Pirates, the Captain Red hat. And I'm just getting the beginning work on this done.
It's so beautiful, and it's so like I've touched my hat, which you made, and but like just looking at the stuff on the website, you can tell so much care and so much like attention to detail goes into your stuff.
Thank you.
And I don't mean to embarrass you, but it's like my audience, if you're gonna purchase a hat, why pay $100 for some fucking thing made overseas and in
a factory?
In a factory, you make your stuff by hand steamed, I'm assuming, and I'm just like, go spend the money.
The only part I don't do is I don't make my own felt. I mean, I do.
Well, I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere.
Well, if I was matting my own felt, the hats would be even more expensive than they are. And I realized that, I hadn't changed my prices for, I think in 23 years, I've changed my price structure 3 times. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we just recently did because of the tariffs, because
Yeah.
everything that I use in my finished product, all of my raw materials have gone up exponentially. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's just everybody.
yeah,
So it's
it's
just,
yeah. So,
yeah,
anyway,
it
we got
sucks,
we
but
got there from monster makeup and what is a kid.
yeah.
So Disney and doing makeup, I had got a fascination for doing makeup and then doing monster makeup in particular. Um, and but then I also, what spurred that along was I did an apprentice program at a summer stock theater here locally,
Mm-hmm.
for 2 summers in a row. I was a child actor apprentice at Weathervane Playhouse. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
Weathervane, when you're in the apprentice program, you do all the behind scenes stuff. You learn how all stagecraft. You learn how to build sets. You learn how to do makeup. You learn how to sew. You learn how to do
Mm-hmm.
lighting, sound, all that stuff. And then did that for 2 years. And of course, your chorus in any of the musicals and in some of the other things they might use you for. I was in Hotel Paradiso. I was a police inspector, and they used me, or a gendarme. They used me because I was only 4'2" or something at the time, and so for me to be this little police guy, it kind of added to the comedy of the play.
Yeah.
But in any case, so did that, and then was interested in drama, and I went into drama in high school, and our local high school drama teacher was also the director of Weathervane Playhouse at the time, and so
Mm-hmm.
he gifted me a uh, book on the Ben. Was it the Ben Nye book on makeup? Big thick tome, big book on
The
how to do all kinds of stage makeup.
I'm looking over at my bookshelf. I know
I
exactly what you're
don't have
talking
it
about. It's
anymore
that.
because somewhere
Yeah.
along the way, it got displaced. But and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sad about that, because he was Tom Humphrey. He was a great guy, um, and that got giving me that makeup book just totally got me into doing makeup. So I ended up doing a lot of the
Yeah.
makeup for all the old people and all the character makeup for all the shows that we were doing in high school. And that would have been my career path had it not been for wrestling. At the time, I was when I started high school, I was 78 pounds, I think, and like four
Mm-hmm.
foot two. So I was
Mm-hmm.
very, very little. And my parents had got me into martial arts before, a couple years before that. They got me into judo and into shorin karate, so that could defend myself from being bullied in
Yeah.
junior high school. And that worked out really well. It only took a couple of altercations, and then word got around in the junior high that don't mess with him. And so,
Good.
but then I got to high school, and my brother was already wrestling. He was 2 years older than me, and he was wrestling, and so I started wrestling, and I
Mm-hmm.
excelled at it. And it was just something where I finally found something sports wise, a physical outlet where I could excel at, because I was competing against people that were my size, or I
Yeah.
should say relatively my size, because in high school the lowest weight class was 98 pounds at the time, and I weighed 78, so I was 20 pounds underweight, but
Wow.
I was a scrapper, and I
Yeah.
had more. Uh, you just start to gain a physical knowledge about how your body works and how you can manipulate somebody else's body, especially with judo. Judo was really helpful
Mm-hmm.
for the wrestling. But anyway, so I started wrestling, and I was doing really, really well. And so did drama and wrestling for the we were 3-year high school. The first 2 years of high school, my senior year came. Tom Humphrey, the director, left to go on to graduate school. He wanted to go back to work on his doctorate in theater arts, and we got a new director. And it came time in the fall for to start prepping for the musical. And I was in my classes. I was in advanced acting and drama club, and like my senior year, I had all electives, and because I had finished all my course material my junior year. So my senior year, I took Super 8 filmmaking. I took science fiction class, fantasy class, mystery class, mythology class. These were over the course of the 2 semesters, right? But the only real class I had at advanced acting, the only real class I had was advanced English, which was Shakespeare and Chaucer. And so those were my senior year. So everything was fun, except that then it came time for the musical, and the new director and the choir director said to me, you have to choose either wrestling, because they're the same season, right? They said practices for the musical are after school at 3:30 every day. So you have to choose. You either wrestle or you do the musical. You can't do both. And the way it was before with Tom Humphrey, he made exceptions for the school's athletes, in that he would work rehearsals around athletics. So he would do split rehearsals. And so if you were an athlete, you would come to practice for the musical or whatever at 6:00. So after you were out of your sport program. So that way he still kept football players, he still kept wrestlers, he still kept basketball players, volleyball players, all those different things. You could do it, and he was just a guy who loved theater and loved people, and he would stay and make his day longer so that he would work around it. Well, they weren't that way. They were like, no, we're here too many hours a day as it is, and we're going home. So you choose wrestling or drama. You can't do both. And I'm a stubborn person, always have been. And the way they put it to me made me make the decision. I was having too much success and enjoying myself too much in wrestling, because it was this new thing that I was finding I was really excelling at and winning all the time, and getting the adoration for it and the self-esteem that it was building in me, because I was finally doing something that I was really, really good at. And in acting, I was just one of a bunch of people. And I wouldn't get the main roles anyway because of my size. You know, I was not going to be the guy. I was going to be the guy that always got typecast as something funny, or as a kid. Like, they could use me. I did Member of the Wedding, and we went to Muncie, Indiana, to the International Thespian Convention, and I was in that cast. We were one of the main stage productions. It was a big honor, and I was Barney McKean because I was a child, and I was playing a child, right? So it worked, but it was one of those moments in your life where it's like you have to make a decision, and that changed the course of my life at that point, because I chose sport, I chose wrestling over drama. And
but that's too bad that they were so hard-nosed.
Well,
you know,
from a standpoint of neither of them had kids or anything. I mean, I could understand if they had kids and they were wanted to get home to their family and their husband and that kind of stuff, but in any case, it was different. And at the time, I was seeing also through the blinders of having 2 years of summer stock theater under the tutelage of this person, and 2 years of high school drama under this person, and things in my mind were a certain way. because he always.
Well, also being in high school for 3 years and you had that one teacher that was more flexible, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, your senior year, your eyes are on graduation, and they're like, oh, you got to do it our way.
They were on a lot of things. My eyes were on trying to make it to the state wrestling competition, which I had a good shot at, and because I was like 34-1 my senior year, I blew my knee out in the district wrestling. I won the sectional. I went to districts and I blew my knee out and didn't get to go to state. But in any case, so my eyes were on the state. There was no way I was going to give that up.
No, of course not.
And as it turned out, that was a really good path for me, because then I did go on to win national championships and be a member of the U.S. team, and I started the first women's wrestling team in the United States, and just all kinds of things like that. So that was a good course for me, but it was what took me away from makeup and acting and theater craft, you know?
Yeah.
So,
so for all you theater teachers out there, be careful what you do.
Careful how you handle people. Well, it's
all, you know, not just theater teachers.
It's teachers in general,
you
man.
Never know how...
Teachers wield a lot of power. They don't even know it a lot of times. And, I mean, a lot of times they're burnout and underpaid. They're all underpaid. And they're burnt out. But in any case, that was what took me away from it. But the movies, and there weren't really... Well, there were some TV shows, like at that time period in the 60s, you know, you had the classic horror movies, and, you know, you had, I remember Night Stalker in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Night Stalker with Darren McGavin, and reruns of The Twilight Zone with Rod Serling were probably, you know, were some of those things that also contributed to my monster kidness, if you will.
Were you a Dark Shadows fan?
Yes.
Because you are right in the middle.
Yeah,
of
I loved the original Dark Shadows. Although I think the newer movie with Johnny Depp, I think was great. I think he did did a really good job. But yeah, I like Dark Shadows, and you know, there were movies that came out like The Blob.
Oh yeah.
And it was all like, I don't know, like I remember one of the ones that freaked me out the most as a kid, The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, Dr. Terwilliger. And then there was one, and I don't even remember the name of the movie, but it was about these creatures that were all eyeballs. They were like a blob with eyes. Do you remember any of that?
I can see it, but I cannot remember the name of it.
It freaked the fuck out of me as a kid. I was so worried about these eyeball thing. And I haven't found it. I mean, I bought, you know, you get those sets that come 50 old movies, the DVDs or CDs, the DVDs. And I have not been able to find that movie again. But in any case, all of
The Beast with a Million Eyes?
Maybe. I don't know. I would have to see it again, because what I have, because I only saw it once, and it's still at 63 years old. It's ingrained in my brain, little bits of it. It was a black and white movie, and there were just bits that are fragments in my brain of this blobby with all these eyes, and as a kid, it freaked me out. But in any case, like I had said, so I was pretty into the monster movies, and I got all of the classic horror models, and I painted them. That was one of the things I think that got me into detail painting, which I later took into doing miniatures and things like that. But just detail painting, and always trying to make mine look, you know, the best, making the cell look like it had mold and growing in it, and the broken terrain that they were on, having moss and ferns and the wolfman and lichens and
Yeah.
moss and stuff like that. So I had all of those, and I had all the Disney models. So model building, haunted, classic horror figure models was a big thing in my room.
And they make reproductions of those older
I
horror models
know
now, or some
they
of them.
do.
And so I've got a
I
few
bet
of
you
them
do.
because I mean, it's nice to kind of go in and like relive that little moment. So yeah, it's fun.
Yep.
They're so expensive though.
Well, that's the
They
thing.
probably were like $1 back in the day, and now they're like
I
$30.
know. That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah. And yeah, we were, and that was, I would get some of those, and I remember actually going to, we had a department store here called Arrow, that the front of they had a big cement arrow, like off the roof of
Oh wow.
the store here in Heath, Ohio, next door to Newark.
Yeah.
Like, how impractical was that to build? But they did shit like that then. It was a giant arrow out of cement. And we used to go there, and I remember taking, you take the price tag off one thing, and you put it on the model. You take a lesser model, and you put it on there, and you take it up, and they'd be like, oh, because nothing was scanned. There were no barcodes. This is all prior to any of that type of computer technology. The register was a bing, 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 push button register. Ching! The drawer came out. Here's your change. But and so the label makers for the price tags were, you had to turn the dial and they'd stick little stickers on them. So they were always really easy just to take one off and put it on the other one.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not saying I was a good kid. I was a pirate I was a pirate. I was a pirate
Look, we were on a budget. We had to do whatever
my
we
parents
had
were
to
school
do.
teachers, so I was on a budget too, and you had to do what you had to do.
It's so true.
I was a little pirate too, a little monster and a little pirate.
A little monster, a little pirate. So we've kind of talked a little bit about, you talk about Disney models. What was your, when was the first time, I'm assuming you've been to Disney?
We went to Disney.
What was the first time
like a lot of Ohio families. Well, I don't know about a lot of Ohio families, because honestly, it amazes me the number of people in this state that have never been out of the state, that have never been out of the, 20-mile area or 50-mile area. Ohio is one of those states that if you drive 2.5 hours in any direction, you're out of the state. So it amazes me that nobody's ever left the state. But in any case, my parents, like I said, were both teachers. And so we always had summers off. And so they always used the summer to do an educational trip. Like we had family down in Naples, Florida. And so we would drive down to Naples and then go over to Orlando and go to Disney. And I think the first time we did that, I was 10 or 12, I think.
Okay.
But we would do...
I think I was about 10 the first time I did.
That's a good age. I think really when kids are really, really little, I don't think they get it, Like I see people there going with their newborns.
I was going to say the same thing. Last time I was there, they're like walking around with their newborns.
I'm like,
what a waste
you
of money.
people really just want to see it yourself because your child's getting nothing out of it. But in any case, I was probably 10 or 12, and we would go down. Mom would get the AAA triptych, I don't know if you know what those were, but AAA, they would make you a book with a spiral thing, all of part of your AAA membership. And it had the road map. It had your routes highlighted on it and everything. They told you where you needed to stop for gas and everything. So it was pretty cool. But we would go sometimes we would go down through we would go through Kentucky, Tennessee, and go to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, and go see and do the Civil War historic type of things. Lookout Mountain, things like that. Other times we would go over and we would go to the Carolinas and see things there. Other times, what was I going to say? Anyway, and we would sidetrack. We'd stop at St. Augustine. at the top of Florida, so it was, in any case, it was Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. It was always going someplace and learning. Williamsburg, Virginia is what I was going to say. Colonial Williamsburg.
Oh, yeah.
So it was always going someplace and learning something on the way. And we would end up down there in Florida and see our relatives. And we would go to Disney. And it was back when, they had, you bought your coupon book and you had 2 tickets and 2 D tickets and whatever they were. And depending on the popularity of the ride, it was, or whatever. I don't really know how they did that. That's my guess. I just remember some rides, it might be because there were bigger lines for Pirates of the Caribbean and for Haunted Mansion. And so those were e-tickets, man. You better have a fucking e-ticket or you're not getting into this one. And it wasn't, we were out of my childhood, and it wasn't until I went to Disneyland when I was in college and on the West Coast, and my girlfriend and I drove down to Disneyland, that they had already, it was just one price included your admittance. There was no, like, theme parks didn't have that structure yet, It was like separate coupons for separate rides were the idea up until that point. I think even Six Flags in Texas that we went to when I was like 8 years old, I think, was still like that. It wasn't a one admission fee, get in. But in any case, so my first trip was probably 1972 or 74, 10 or 12, somewhere in that range. But yeah, then it's like those are my favorite 2 rides, and so hooked since then. And there have been others that have been added to that, of course. Like, you can't beat the Avatar ride. The flying your Ikron, that's pretty insane. And I haven't been been yet to,
have you done Galaxy's Edge?
I have not. We haven't, because we've been busy, and then COVID hit. And since Rebecca and I both had suppressed immune systems, we were like,
it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, it wasn't worth the risk.
But like when you are able to do it, it's a lot.
It's on our list. And when we found out I had cancer in 2017, we did a Disney cruise, because it was like, at the time they gave me 5 years, and it was like, we were like, well, we're going to beat this, but you never know. So we're going to go on a cruise. So we took a Disney cruise on the Disney Dream, and that was awesome. If you haven't ever done a Disney cruise,
I have never done it, but I've heard about other people's experiences, and I couldn't
even sleep. I would walk the halls. I would walk the halls of the ship at night, because nobody's doing anything at night except the staff. Like, the staff, they totally drain the pool. The staff's cleaning the pool and stuff. But I would go look at everything at night just to get a different perspective on it. And just on the cruise ship, all the art, like, so much of the art is interactive. Like, things are happening in it. You don't notice it unless you can walk right by it. But if you stop and look at the picture, you start noticing that it's animated, or that things change in it and stuff like that. It's just phenomenal. And all of it was like that. It was just so cool.
their attention to detail is just unbelievable.
God is in the details, man. It's like, I would highly recommend it. In fact, we want to go. We had plans to go to take Wild for his graduation present. He graduated this year, but things just didn't work out this year financially. But we plan on it again, and we want to go upon the new Disney Treasure, because they have the Haunted Mansion bar, and it looks fantastic.
Yes. What are you, speaking of which, like, what are your thoughts on, so more so with Pirates of the Caribbean, but like they'll update things, and of course they added Johnny Depp and they've taken away some things, and what are your thoughts on like
Well, I'm not a
that?
traditionalist in that sense. I mean, I know a lot of people have their memories and they get personally wrapped up in the ride,
Yeah.
and they find, and then they're like, the ride's not what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, things change, man. Grow up.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, they
you're
do.
not the
Yeah.
same you were when you were 10 years old either. You're not the
Right.
same you were when you were 16 or 23 or 40, or it's like, things change. It's part of life.
Yeah.
And you're allowed your opinion. If you don't like it, that's fine. My opinion is
Yeah.
that change is inevitable, and if you're a business and they have to walk that line, they have to stay relevant to the times. And
Yeah.
I think one thing that Disney's done a good job of, sometimes they've gone a little overboard in their attempt to act quickly, and sometimes acting too quickly to be politically correct about something, and they don't give it the full investigative research or something to formulate an opinion. They want to be quick.
Yeah.
And so they do something, and then people are like, well, that they end up getting more pushback than you would expect on something. And
but then sometimes, like, we were there a few years ago, and like we did Splash Mountain, and you're riding through it, and you're like, I cannot believe that this still exists in its current. And of course, they changed it,
right. And you're like, and when you think, Song of the South, you couldn't.
Of course, they never say Song of the South,
Right,
but of course,
but
you can't
buy the movie. Disney was like,
No.
they would re-release movies on a schedule every whatever years they would bring it back out, and then it got to a point, and I don't know what that changed. I don't know if it was Bob Iger or who, whatever. They got to a point where if you want, Peter Pan, you can just order off of Amazon. You don't have to, you'll get the newest edition of the thing, except for Song of the South, and
which is so weird. I remember very specifically my mother taking me to see it, like in the 70s.
Yeah.
So there must have been a re-release at some point, but I
remember seeing
when you think about it now.
I remember seeing it
on
Wonderful World of Disney in my childhood, so that had to have been in the late 60s, early 70s. I saw it on Disney. I don't know when they took it out of circulation, and I don't know when they literally stopped allowing it to be produced and just put a kibosh on it altogether. But no, I'm excited to see what is it, Tatiana's Bayou, or
I think
or
so.
whatever it's called now, and I think that's fine. And I think it's one of those real things that people who have been overlooked and marginalized deserve that to be fixed.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And boo-hoo to all you fucking white rednecks who wanted Splash Mountain to continue to be Song of the South. And it's just, I mean, I could go, if we had a political podcast, you and I could go on and on forever.
I mean, look, this podcast has turned political several times.
But
look, I invite like-minded
well,
people
it's like,
on my podcast.
It's like all the boohooing about Confederate statues being removed and stuff like that. It's like the majority of those statues weren't from the Confederacy. They went in a concerted effort to propagate
Yeah.
the you know,
It was the daughters of the
the
Confederacy
daughters of the
back in
Confederate
the early
soldiers and
20th
sons.
century.
It was
Yeah.
the daughters of the Confederate soldiers and sons of Confederate whatever groups
Yeah.
that you could be any town. You could be up here. There's a town actually within 30 miles of Newark, Ohio, in the
Mm-hmm.
north, that they
Yeah.
have a Confederate statue in their square because the guy originally was from there. And at the time, the Daughters of the Confederacy, if you wanted a statue, didn't matter where you were, they would pay for it to put it in
Yeah.
your town. So
Yeah.
no, people don't need people.
It was propaganda.
It was
plain
plain
and
and
simple.
the lost cause rhetoric,
Yeah.
and they need to be removed if they want to have a museum in Atlanta or someplace and put those in
Yeah.
there, put all the statues and say this is the Museum of Confederate Statues to so that the history isn't lost, because history's in books. It's not in statues that are
Right.
So
the propaganda isn't lost, but I also think they need to have, if they're going to do that, and I'm all for them.
I'm totally
doing
for them
that.
doing that.
I mean, because at the end of the day, I understand it's a piece of quote unquote art.
Well,
I think it's still but so is like Russian,
they weren't.
Soviet stuff and North Korea, all that. It's art, but it's propaganda. Right. So if they want to put it together, that's great. But I think there absolutely has to be like a disclaimer, like this was all erected by the Daughters of the Confederacy in the early 20th century. It was not, So will they do that? Probably not.
Probably not. But well, yeah, especially with things being all kinds of things being turned around. So, yeah, but in any case, so. How did we get on that from? Anyway, we were talking about.
That's my fault.
That's okay.
So
my first.
I like to poke the.
So
bear.
my first trip, our first trips to Disney. So, yeah, that was when I was 10 or 12, and favorite rides: Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion. Although I'm still a sucker for Peter Pan's Flight.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. And I love the Snow White thing going through, because that's very dark and spooky, and all of those things that just had a little bit of an edge to them. I love.
Do you like Seven Dwarfs Mine Car?
Yes, I do. And I like Mr. Frog's Wild Ride too. I remember my grandmother and I riding through that. So it's
didn't they take it out of Disney World?
I think they took it out, but at least in Disneyland, it's still there. At least it was a few years ago.
I think they took it out of Disney World in Florida. And what did I just see? There's something else opening up in Adventureland. That's going to be. It's where they had the for a little bit of time there. Well, probably 8 years. They had a Pirates of the Caribbean extension where it was interactive. There was a series of maps.
Oh, wow.
Did you have any of those?
No, so I haven't been to Disney World since I was 10 years old. I've been to Disneyland.
Well, they had in the section that was between Jungle Cruise and Pirates of the Caribbean. There was an interactive thing. You stopped by a little building, and there were 5 different maps. So they were 5 different quests, and they send you.
Look, your family and my family are going to have to go to Disney World.
They send you through, like, there's stuff. A lot of it is in the walkways out where people are at, and you have to find clues that are in the cement, in the decorations, on the menu, in the pirate tavern, in all these different things. And you get to keep the map. They're keepsake maps, and they all lead you to interactive stuff in the store, in the pirate store. Just
That's
all
so
kinds of cool
cool.
shit. Well, they got rid of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, well, of course.
they got rid of that section, and they have something else. I'm trying to think of what it was that they're building right now. That's going to come out next year. I can't remember.
Okay. I'll have to look it up, but this is I love this stuff.
But
so I'll segue into this. So I've seen some of your decor items and props and things that you built from the Haunted Mansion, and I just love it. So when did you like? What was the first thing you kind of took inspiration from and started making?
What was the first thing? Well, I'll have to think about that. What was the first thing? I think the first thing was, well, we decided, like I saw somebody that did their own fireplace and mantle in their house, and they made it all. Then they did it for Halloween, for a party, and they did it out of cardboard, and it was pretty cool. I mean, they did a pretty good job. And I was like, well, I am a carpenter. When we moved back to Ohio, my day job, besides the hat business, my day job was I went to work construction with my brother. My brother's a local home builder here in Newark, and he was at the time working on a manor house, $6 million manor house that someone had designed, and he was framing that, and he needed help. So we had moved back, and I helped frame that house. I was on the framing crew, and I mean, it's beautiful. The whole thing is stone. It's got a turret. It's got the inside, the cabinetry was all done by the Amish. The Amish cabinet makers did all the cabinetry and all the woodworking. All the walls on the ground floor are wainscoted with wood paneling, and cathedral ceiling in the main living room with a fireplace that's stoned all the way up to the ceiling, and just a beautiful castle. We would call it a manor house. Anyhow, so I have that building experience, and anyway, a fireplace mantle's a pretty relatively small project. But anyway, I was like, let's do bookcases and build in our mantle and kind of turn this into Haunted Mansion. And my wife Rebecca was totally on board with that. She's always on board with all of this stuff. And
that's cool.
And so we did that. We got an electrical fireplace that plugs in. I made the hearth, and I made the mantle, and I made the sides that look bricked, and did everything brown, dark brown, so it all matches. And then of course I wanted some cool detail to the fireplace, so we got those 24 or whatever size they are 30-inch skeletons that they sell at Halloween. Painted them same brown, put them in this shape we wanted, put them on each side of the mantle, and so started doing some details like that. And one of the things I also saw was the Hatbox Ghost that's in the Haunted Mansion in the door frame woodwork, and I was like, I could do that. So I got a piece of wood, and I routed out the face and did that, and then I cast that, and so I made multiples out of polyurethane resin, and we put them on both sides of the bottom of the fireplace. And then I put them outside. We have a bay window on the outside of our house. In each of the segments of the bay window, I put them up at the top. So there's 5 of them or 4 of them outside the house, which for most people go totally unnoticed. They're just part of the brown woodwork that's up there, but they're there. So I think that was the first thing, was the fireplace. And then I've always loved the gargoyle. And so I wanted to do the, gargoyle candlesticks. And
Yep.
what
I have this kind of bank of just basic bookcases over here with my collection and books and so. And I've got they're from Spirit Halloween, but the two gargoyles
nice.
are on either side.
The Spirit Halloween gargoyles aren't bad. We got
not.
them too, and I got one. That's the thing. Again, here's what happens, right? People start making gargoyles, and they had to do them first by hand, and then the next gargoyles people created were 3D printed on their own, and you could get those online. And then Disney goes, "Oh, I just saw that, people are doing 3D printed gargoyles. We better get those out." So the next thing you know, Disney and their collaboration with Lowe's and some other department stores, Target, and whatever, they start bringing out Disney gargoyles, candelabras. And so, but along that line, then, I took a gargoyle head, I changed it, I made the tongue hanging out like it's a doggy, like it's like like doing that.
Yep.
And I cast those, and I made one into a cane, a walking cane.
Oh,
and
cool.
I've used them for doorknob or for chair armrest knobs on chair that I refinished in the Haunted Mansion decor from the Disney Treasure. It's the maroon chair with the gold they call it a Donald Duck face. It's gold.
Yep.
And it's got two gargoyle heads on the end of the arms. I've used them as knobs on dressers, so that they're
That's cool.
a knob pull. So just things like that. And then along the way, like we saw the Disney Treasure. So, we saw the sea creature picture frame, mirror frame. And I said, oh, well, we got to do that. So we did that. I did hand sculpted that and did the portrait of the captain of the ship that's on there. And, we did Master Gracie and we've done we decided that we wanted our living room to be interactive. So I put I did a frame around a flat screen. So it's got a big frame around it. And on the flat screen, we do have a loop of Master Gracie. It's kind of like Dorian Gray. Master Gracie changes.
Right.
And to the point where he becomes a skeleton and his head falls off. We have that one. We have a ship on the ocean that's in a storm on the mantle. And so we can play different things above our mantle in the picture frame. So it's a little bit kind of interactive.
I love that. And one of the things I love so much about Haunted Mansion is because, we talked about earlier, the devil's in the details. There's so much detail in that ride, just even going to, get in the ride part. Yeah,
in the front of house when you're walking to get into the. And Disney's always done a great job of creating. That's a big thing with them, is creating that environment into, the ride. And if you're a person who's not just standing there on your phone while you're in the ride, there's a lot to take in. I mean, the tombstones going into Haunted Mansion have such, are so much fun.
Yeah.
And if you get, when you're the one entrance, you can see that this is Disney World. Disneyland is different. It's a totally different building, different design. But in Disney World, you've got not only the tombstones exiting, you've got tombstones on the way in. You go past the servants' quarters, which has the bells for them to ring for the different servants. Just a lot of stuff. And then you get into that entryway, and there's the bats on the stanchion bats. You've got all the detail in the woodwork. You've got hatbox ghosts in the doorway. You've got, it's just, there's so much stuff.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the things, I guess the reason why I'm asking about like your creation of it is because one of the things I find so fascinating about making these props is figuring out how it was
Right.
done. And I mean, there's so many videos and explanations of like, this is how this is done and so forth. But like coming from theater and coming from that world, it's just, I find it
fascinating,
endlessly fascinating.
Well,
so
there's a lot of, there are a lot of things that I've put on my Patreon site. I do a lot of details on. There's a lot of things on scenic painting, how to get effects, how to corpseify things, how to do the skeletons and stuff like that. That I've learned along the way. Tricks and trades. But for me, almost with anything, it always comes down to painting of whatever it is. The realism for me is in the details of the painting and whether you've got whether you get that right, whether it's, the finish of something being metalled and then taking that metal and aging it so that it's, like I sell the sign, the Pirates of the Caribbean ride sign. And, I do it. You can get it in gold or silver and you can get it bright. Or the fun part is I do the one that looks just like it is if you walked up to it at Disney, where it's totally patinaed. It's got rust. It's got calcification of the water that's been coming out of the little tube. And so that kind of stuff that's where I find the fun. It's also the part that takes all the time. So when you're talking about buying a custom product, from my perspective, I charge whatever, but I don't make any money on any prop I do that's like that, because the number of hours that go into painting it, if I was working for $20 an hour, say, it would be thousands of dollars, and who's going to buy a sign for, it's like, so in my opinion, as the artisan, someone buying a custom-made prop from me, having me do something like that, it's a really freaking good deal that they're getting. They're gonna get a screaming deal, and that's the same as whether you're doing, furniture, or you're doing weapons, or you're doing clothing.
Have you built any of your own weapons, or?
I have designed numerous of my weapons, and I have had other blacksmiths make them. As far as my edged weapons are concerned, I don't do that. I do, like I do with a lot of things, I take something that already is, and I change that. Like this won't be out before his birthday. I think for my son, my Wild wanted a axe. He's getting into splitting wood, and I have this whole wall over here. You can't see it, but someday we'll do a thing. This one is Viking axes, bearded axes, Native American war clubs, tomahawks, throwing hawks. These over here are all flintlocks, real functioning flintlocks on this wall, non-functioning also on that wall over there. Then there's my Blade Runner guns, all of my Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Star Wars weapons that I've done. Over there's all space punk, new age, steampunk weapons. And then you've got the smattering of skulls, because there's my skull stuff, and of course all the swords, cutlasses, and whatnot are lined here. The Asian influenced swords are over there. The rapier, sabers, and everything are over here. post-apocalyptic 60 caliber rifles and AR-15s and stuff are down there. It's like the whole room is all, and so
It's too bad your collection's so
yeah,
small. I'm sorry.
True. It is because there's a lot more I could have. But the plague mask is up there that I did by hand. The steampunk gauntlets right there. But in any case, a lot of these things start out as something else, and I change them, or I, repaint them. There's and change them in that respect. There's hardly anything that I get that doesn't get changed, even if it's some company's version of the bat for the stanchion in the Haunted Mansion. I got it. I changed it, immediately. Give me 1 second.
Sure. While you're gathering, one of my projects is like you can get these I use that term very loosely, replica pistols from dentists.
Uh-huh.
And it's like they're cool because, they're
and they won't get you in trouble.
Kind of the weight, and they won't get you in trouble, but they definitely need a lick of paint. So
like this is this is a cheap costume Jack Sparrow pistol.
Yeah, Jack Sparrow pistol, yeah.
The party store.
But you brought it up and showed it to me. I'm like, wow, that looks like a real flintlock, like a real.
This is started as this, which I don't know if the monitor can really show it. This is a cheap plastic. You can squeeze this thing and it flexes and squeaks and and this is.
It looks so
good.
This
is the finished product, and a camera probably doesn't show it, but
and I mean, of course, I know how all these parts work, but it's like the thing that really sells it is you've got the leather wrapping the flint, or at least the paint indicate, and
that's
in that,
and that's again, it's just all in the details. And I have 2 Jack Sparrow pistols that are functional, that are real ones, that I had made when I was doing the pirate trading company, which was one of our other endeavors there for a number of years. Rebecca and I had the pirate trading company. We also had the pirate furniture company. I had a dozen Jack Sparrow's pistols made from a maker in India, one of the top makers who still produce flintlocks in their factory by hand with hand tools. They still make every little screw that goes into it by hand, like they did back in the day when they worked for the British East India Company. So I had 10 of them made. I sent my diagrams. I had a blueprint of it that I drew up, sent it to them. They made them. The first 12 came out fairly decent. Took very little extra work. They can't send them functionally to the U.S., so, they had to have the touch hole drilled into the barrel. And I had to case harden all the frizzen so that when you hit it, it would actually spark. But that was pretty much it. Minimal work. And I sold those, and then I ordered another 12, and I pre-sold them so that I had the money to do it. And got the second 12, and they looked nothing like the first ones. And I had to complain, and I got no recourse from that. They didn't send they were supposed to send me back my blueprint. They kept my blueprint. They ended up trying to sell them on eBay themselves. They wouldn't. So anyway, I took the second 12 pistols and I refinished them. I recarved all of them myself, refinished them. I lost money on the second round of those pistols, but in any case, so I kept 2 for myself. So I do have these, but like I said, this one started out as a $4 or $6 or whatever plastic gun. This one's totally filled with epoxy. It's heavy. It feels like a real gun at this point.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if I had a Den X, which I do have one Den X pistol, and they're not bad. I have, you know what I have is of Den X is I have all of my Colt 45s and my Winchester rifle are Den X. And I think they do a great job.
I mean, I like them, but I mean, they're a little exaggerated, some of them, and they're like on the barrel is a little decorative for my tastes.
A little bit too much embellishment.
You know, but for like prop pistols that you can use, because I've used them in films, and we did Varney the Vampire, and they were running around the woods in these these flintlocks, and you put the muzzle flash in post. I mean, it looks absolutely real. So
nice. Well, see, we luckily, since I do have the real ones and I do have a swivel gun and stuff, we don't have to do that flash in post. We can literally shoot them as long as we have the property. We don't have the property now, but.
Well, last episode I talked about like our first theater production in Austin was Treasure Island. I ordered a flintlock from I can't remember who it was, but it was one of those Indian flintlocks. That thing was like a hand cannon, and I had the captain fire it at some point. I said, we're just, we're gonna be very careful, but we put a little powder in the pan, and I wasn't gonna like have them fire it out of the thing, but like it scared the shit out of the audience.
Oh,
and I
bet.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
So
I bet when we shoot my swivel gun, and it's got its own stand that we stake down. It literally, the first time we shot it, we took it to a beach, and you could watch the shock wave of the sand go. It was crazy. And then
when I worked at Fort William Henry, I think I discussed this earlier too. Part of the tour is we would fire a cannon. And of course, this is in Lake George, New York, and there's a lot of tourists around, and the lake is right there. But we would, put the I shouldn't do that on camera; it looks weird. But you're
ramming it.
You're putting you ram the powder.
Ramming the wadding down the barrel after the powder.
And exactly, and this is early to mid '90s. So every car alarm is still part of the car, and we would fire.
And all the car alarms would go off.
And all the car alarms, and like we would mentally count how many we would get, and it became
a competition with yourselves to see how many you could set off.
Oh yeah, how many we could set off. So
I love that. Love it.
It was fun. It was fun. But yeah, I mean, I love all that stuff, and it's great fun to dress up and show a lot, and people love it. And I remember in New Orleans, like I'd had a few cocktails at this point, but people would come up to me and they'd clearly want to take a picture, and they'd be a little shy about it. And in my intoxicated silliness, I'm like, I want to take a picture with you. Like just random people in street clothes. And
well, that's another side story. So back when we had talked about it before, back when I did the first Jack Sparrow costume, so it was still 2003. This was only months after the show had come out. I had completed my costume. I wanted to go down to Disneyland, right? So this is when I was living
in costume.
I was living in the Pacific Northwest. We were living up in Hood River at this time. But anyhow, I drove down and did the NorCal Pirate Festival, and then I drove down to Disney, and I had planned it all out. I knew I was going to get in trouble if I took my real sword, so I got a costume sword. I redid the hilt of it so it looked like a real sword. In the scabbard, it just stuck in the scabbard. It was just basically a unusable piece of anything, and I had my whole costume, And I went and I got there. I was the first car parked in their parking lot. I went to catch the tram, the ride from the parking lot, and I was standing there, and security rolled up on me. And security says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm getting ready to go into the park, mate, you know." And they said, "No, no, 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 you're not going." And I said, "No, it's all good, it's all good." And I said, "My sword's okay, you know." And I'm pulling my sword out, and I'm like, and they're like, "No, no, no, it's not that." And by then, more security had showed up. And they're like, "You can't go in because you can't wear a costume in there. It's for your own protection, as well as for the protection of all of our, you know,
costume staff,
patrons and everything. Is that they don't know. They're not going to know that you don't work for Disney. So, and you're going to get swarmed." They're like, "Honestly, dude, this is the best Captain Jack we've seen, and you can't go in there looking like that because you're just going to get swarmed." And I said, "Oh, that sucks, you know," kind of thing. They said, "What you can do is you can go over to Disney Downtown and walk around there." And I was like, okay, all right, I'll do that. So I went over to Disney Downtown, and I was there signing autographs, Captain Jack Sparrow, getting pictures taken with everybody. It was great fun. And 4 little cars, little, you know, they're little buggies, golf carts, roll up on me, and all these guys pile out and surround me. And one guy in a suit with an earphone gets in my face, and he's all puffed up. And he says, "You can't be here." And I said, "No, it's okay. They gave me permission, you know." And he said, "No, you can't be here. I am the head of security for all Disney properties in Anaheim, and you will see yourself out of here now, or you will be arrested." And I said, "Captain Jack's got to go," you know? And I was like, so I left, but I went to outside of Grauman's Chinese Theater, where the costumed actors hang out, character actors, and people would just walk up to me and they'd say, "I'd like to get a picture with you. Is that okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And they'd be, "How much is it?" And I'd say, "Well, you know, whatever you want to, you know, I can't charge you, but a gratuity's definitely accepted." And I made enough money that I went over across the street to the Harley Davidson store and bought my first pair of engineer boots.
Oh, it's like a motorcycle.
No, not that much. I bought my first pair of engineer boots that would then also later function as pirate boots in as other pirate. But I made enough to go buy a $200 pair of Harley boots from the people that were getting their pictures taken with me. And I met a lot of nice people that were Batman and Spider-Man and Superman and Marilyn Monroe. And I met all these different other character actors, and they were all like, "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" And all this. And I said, "No, man, this is a one-day trip for me. I just, you know." And so that was my one experience as Jack Sparrow with Disney, trying to go there with my stuff all looking good, and I was good. I was too good, and I was not allowed to do it for everybody's own protection. And lo and behold,
it sucks that they're like, "Hey, you can go down here," and then they come in and
that was the bad part of it. But and then it wasn't, you know. Then for the second and third movie, Disney was thinking. Disney had Jack Sparrow impersonators added to both Disneyland and Disney World, working on a rotating shift. And, you know, like when Pirates of the Caribbean Curse of the Black Pearl came out, there was no Disney merchandise because they didn't think it was going to be a success. They really questioned Johnny Depp playing such a flamboyant character, and Disney thought this is going to tank. But so then they merchandised the hell out of Pirates 2 and 3. They thought, you know, they literally had Pirates of the Caribbean tampons. They had
Oh
pirates.
my
They had Pirates of the
God.
Caribbean garden hoses. They
Yeah.
literally, their people literally got licensing on every single freaking product you could think of. It was thousands of products that they had.
Oh, that's
And yeah,
insane.
it was insane. But anyway, that was my story about what led to.
So, yeah. So going back to that a little bit, I know there's this thing that you can do called Disney bounding,
Yeah, we
if
Disney
I'm saying
bound a
that
lot.
correctly. Yeah. So you're like dressing. Well, I'll let you
So
explain what
sure.
that is.
So Disney bounding came about. I don't know, at this point. Let's see, Wild's 18, 19. Disney bounding came about 15 years ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you take a character that you want to portray from Disney, and you basically work with the color palette of the character. Like, let's see, what have we? I got to think of who I've done. I've done Tigger, for example.
Yeah.
Tigger, I wore a T-shirt that had a white circle on it and black stripes. I wore orange Puma shoes with black stripe.
Yeah.
I had orange camo pants. So it's
Yeah.
basically an orange and black, theme. Um,
Yeah.
Rebecca's done Tinkerbell. She's done Mickey Mouse. I did the Mad Hatter. I
Mm-hmm.
wore, and from the Johnny Depp Disney movie version of the Mad Hatter. And what I did on a
Mm-hmm.
lot of mine, I would wear a fedora, and I just sold all of them because they were taking up space downstairs. But I did Captain Jack
Yeah.
Sparrow, where I wore a white T-shirt. I wore dark gray shorts. I wore brown
Mm-hmm.
shoes. I wore a brown fedora. My brown fedora had medallions on them that said CJS for Captain Jack Sparrow. It had beads
Yeah.
on it. When I did Peter Pan, I had a green fedora with the red feather,
Mm-hmm.
and then an all green outfit. So it's just basically taking, and especially if they have things like something that's trademarky from that character, like Captain Jack's hat. So in my fedora,
Yeah.
I had the crossed sticks,
Yeah.
stitched X's on both sides.
Right.
So
Right.
you're just trying to take elements of a character and represent that. So it's
Yeah.
like not really cosplaying because you're not trying to be the authentic character. You're trying to be a stylized representation of that character,
The
the
spirit
spirit
of
of it.
that
And so that's
character.
called Disney
Yeah.
bounding. And
See, I love
yeah,
that, and of course, I've watched several videos on it, and I am intrigued because I love theater and costuming and
yeah.
cosplay and all that stuff. So of course, I'm drawn to that crap. Um, uh, I forgot what I was gonna say, but my mind went completely blank. But I think that's very cool.
It is.
I'm sorry that you had that experience as
Oh,
Jack
well.
Sparrow there,
So,
but at the same
so
time, Disney being Disney.
here's the better story.
Oh, okay.
The better story is it is 2006. It is right before Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3 are going to come out.
Yeah.
Disney, Zizzle, who makes toys, and
Yeah.
FAO Schwartz.
I had all of those toys. I loved them.
Disney, Zizzle, and FAO Schwartz have a Captain Jack lookalike. They have a Pirates of the Caribbean lookalike contest.
Oh, wow.
Sponsored by joint thing at FAO Schwartz in downtown New York.
Uh-huh.
And this was literally, we just found out about it 3 days before it's going to happen. Rebecca is 9 months pregnant, about to pop with Wild, about to pop any moment. and she finds out about it. She's like, babe, you got to go do this thing in New York. And the prize is a Volvo 4-wheel drive or $50,000. You can take your choice. And she's like, you got to go win this. And I'm like, all right. We got online. We found a cheap flight ticket. I took all my Jack Sparrow stuff. I had my sword and my flintlock in a gun case that said, firearm. Yeah. And everything. I checked on it, Portland, flew to New York, no problem. Do the thing, do the gig. There were 60-some people showed up as Jack Sparrow. I got 5th place, which was a gift certificate for, I forget, $20 or something from FAO Schwartz. And I used it to buy a stuffed leopard, Lenny the leopard, that I gave to my son, and he still has it. That's a little sidebar, but in any case, Lenny the leopard. I did not know that you were in a long line. They wanted to film you. You come up in front of the people. There was a panel of people, and they asked you a couple questions, and you act like Jack Sparrow, and all of that went out the window when I came up, and they called me Mini Jack because of my size. They were like, oh, look, we've got a Mini Jack Sparrow. And
assholes.
That just, I went like that. And then the second comment out of someone's mouth was, it looks like Jack had an accident with his bronzer, because I was really pale right before going, so I went and had a spray tan. Yeah. So I guess they thought I looked too orange. But anyway, I didn't perform very well as Jack Sparrow because my head was not in it at that point. But
people are such dicks. Why do people have to do
Yeah, I
that?
know. The guy who did win, Ron Rodriguez, is a buddy of mine from LA, and Ronnie became Johnny Depp's body double for Pirates 4 and 5, and has doubled him in a lot of things. He is a Johnny Depp, not only a Captain Jack, but a Johnny Depp impersonator. So anyway,
is he the guy that sells this like replica buttons and
things
online, or is that somebody else?
Is Richard. That's Acme Supply, and it's Richard Maldonado.
Okay.
And Richard's also a great guy. It's another good guy. But anyway, Ron Rodriguez won. Anyway, I go back the next day. I go to the airport. I go to the airport
because I know it's coming.
I give him my case. Go through the metal detector. I'm ready to head to the plane, and I get excuse me.
Yeah.
And they're like, I go over to where they have my case, and they're like, is this your case? I'm like, yes, it is. And it's locked. It says gun case. I said, yes, that's mine. And they're like, would you open it up, please? And there's a cop standing there with them. And they open it up, and they look at that, and is this a sword? Yes.
Yeah.
What are you doing with this? I'm a Jack Sparrow impersonator. I was here to do a gig at FAO Schwartz. They're like, guys like, we got it.
Yeah.
He's like, just a minute. And then more cops show up. I can see through the window. Cop car pull up. More cops come in.
Oh my God.
And they're like, what is this? Is this a gun? And I'm like, it's a flintlock. Right. It's not a gun. It's a flintlock. And they're like, And I'm like, no, it's in a gun case. It's locked. There's no ammunition. Everything's fine.
Right.
You don't tell us what's fine. The guys, and then they got their sergeant, and then he comes up, and in the meantime, one guy's measuring the length of the sword. He's going end for end with his multi-tool, measuring 6 inches at a time. We got a 30-inch blade here, and I happen to have my pocket knife was also in the case. They flicked that open. They're measuring that. They're like, 1 count, 2 counts. They got a gun, 3 counts. Put your hands behind your back.
Oh, fuck.
And I'm like, what? No, I was at a gig, and I go like this to pull the thing out, and the guy's like, get your hands behind your back. And I'm like, I was just going to show you a postcard from the event. And they get it, and they see it, but in any case, they handcuff me. I'm like, this is bullshit. This is really, and the guy's like, I don't know what your problem is. This happens every day. And I'm like, it doesn't happen every day to me. It's like, you're parading me through the airport in handcuffs. They put me in the cruiser. They take me to Port Authority. Take my belt. I'm wearing flip-flops and shorts and a shirt. And they're like, people keep coming. Like, I'm standing in a room by myself. Other police officers keep coming and looking in the door and then leaving. And finally, a guy comes up, and they took my wallet. They took my ID. They took everything. And the guy finally comes in, and he says, I'm Sergeant so-and-so. Let me get this straight. You're an actor. And I'm like, yes. You were here for an event. Yes. And I can hear in the other room, I can hear these guys flipping pages, and it's like, I'm not finding anything in the...
Yeah.
I don't think so. Well, I think so.
Yeah.
And he comes in and says, so you're an actor, you're doing this gig, you were here, you're going home, this was a straight flight here, straight flight back, yeah. And he said, and these are your props. And I said, yes, thank you, someone who gets it. And he said,
right.
Now, I'm going to release you if you missed your flight, but I'm going to release you if you promise that if you are summoned, you'll come back to New York City for an arraignment. And I'm like, what? I'm not coming back to, and he's like, well, that's your choice. Your choice is I throw you in jail. You're going to be there the weekend, because this was like I think it was a Friday or Saturday. Anyway, I was going to be there overnight. He's like, and you'll get arraigned on Monday morning. And so you're going to be in New York jail for at least 24 hours. What do you want to do? And I was like, I will definitely come back, sir. I will definitely come back. And so they let me go and take me back to the airport. And I said, so I'm like, it's late at night now. The flights are all done. I have no hotel to stay in. I'm going to stay in the airport. Do we have a place where you can lock up my gun case with my stuff? And they're like, yeah, they can lock that up for you. And I said, great. And then that'll just make it on the flight. They got me a new flight the next morning. Yeah. They're like, I'm like, so that'll just be put on the flight. And they're like, oh no, you have to check that in. And I'm like, so I gotta check this. So I got to do this again? We already did this. We got to do this again. They're like, no, we have no way of doing that. You have to check it in tomorrow. And I'm like, great. So the next day comes. I've stayed awake all night because I've worried about being accosted in the airport at night. And so I get my case. The place opens up. I get my case. I stick it to the thing. It goes through the line. They get a cop because that is their procedure there since 9/11. was that they
Yeah.
have to have a cop sign off on any gun case. And so the case
Right.
comes in front of them. The guy says, "Is this your case?" "Yes, it is." "Will you open it up?"
Did they at least give it like a note? Hey, we've been through
Nothing.
this, or
"Will you open that up?" "Yes, I will." I open it up. He looks at it and he goes, "Cool flintlock. Sword? Are you like a Revolutionary War reenactor?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like,
yeah. What the
"Cool.
hell?
You're free to go." So it all depends on what dick you get at the airport. And that guy was totally cool with it because he had it in his brain pan. He had the experience, and it was perfectly fine. He knew what was going on. It was just outside of the wheelhouse of those other people. They hadn't dealt with it before, and they were kind of on high alert from 9/11, so they were worried about the pirate guy.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
But that's my best Captain Jack story. And so I was detained on the day that was Rebecca's due date. Like I called from.
I was gonna ask. Was there any point you're like, my son?
I used my phone call to call Rebecca. And I mean, I wasn't booked, but I said, "Can I call my wife?" And they were like, "Yeah." So I called Rebecca and said, "Babe, I've been arrested. I haven't been booked, but I've been arrested and don't have wild. You got to hold off." And as it turned out, even though it was his due date, as it turned out, the little bugger didn't want to come out for 6 more days. So,
oh wow.
Yeah. Anyway, there's been some crazy experiences.
That's crazy. I was on a flight going to Germany, and I was gonna go film some stuff, and I had like a monopod. And they took a look at that and like, well, you could beat somebody to death with that. I'm like, I would never have thought about
I can
that.
kill
So
someone
I had to
with a pen.
go back and check. I mean, yeah, just it's so weird, and they're so power hungry.
Yeah.
Well,
and it changed a lot. People. I mean, it's another one of those things. It's like, again, when you're my age, you get to see things have changed a lot. Like when I was younger and I flew, I would always fly armed with at least a knife. Nobody would take it, and then it started happening where they would be like, "Oh, well, you can't take this. We'll just hold that in the cockpit. We'll just hold that and give it to you when we deboard." And it was like, okay, but then along the line, they decided that they don't want to have weapons in the cockpit either because somebody could get to them. So then it became you can't fly with that. You can go over there and we have a post office inside the airport right over there. You've got 15 minutes. You can go mail that to yourself. And you'd be like, "Oh, cool." And you go do that. And then it got to the point where it was like, you can't carry a pen. You can't carry a hairbrush that's
you can't
too
have
long.
Liquid.
You can't have liquid that could be a combustible, because they don't know or whatever. So yeah, it's, I guess, safe better than sorry.
I mean, and that's true.
But it does make it inconvenient.
But the way they react to some things is just a little out of hand.
Yeah.
There was no reason they had to treat you like that. So, and for those of you who don't know how a flintlock works, it's like literally you have a lock on the side of the pistol that could be removed, and unless you have gunpowder and the ball and the wadding, it just doesn't work like a modern
it's a process, which is why in the 65, 67 gun law, they took flintlocks, they took muzzle loaders off of the list of firearms that are restricted to people because, like you said, you have to have the powder to go down the barrel to project the missile, the ball. You have to have the lead ball. You have to have wadding so that the ball
So
and the
it doesn't
powder
just
don't roll out
fall
the
out.
barrel. You have to have priming powder to go in the pan, and you have to have
And
a
that's why,
flint to
like,
create a
in
spark.
cartoons and everything, we make fun of it because it's such a damn, wait there
Right.
while I load. It you
Right.
just
And
it's
that's the thing. It's like once you fired a shot from a flintlock pistol, especially for example if you were a pirate, that became a bludgeoning tool at that point. The
yeah
gun part of it is gone. It's like for all intents and purposes it's a paperweight.
yeah, and like if you get the powder wet, it is completely useless, and I can't imagine using the stuff at sea very much and it being very reliable.
Well,
I mean, that's why you had edged
and
weapons most of the
that's
time.
why also the weapons, it wasn't the one of the myths that you see in pirate movies has always been that, I mean they do show it sometimes, is there was a lockup for weapons. People weren't running around the ship wearing their weapons all the time. There was a lockup,
Right.
and weapons would be distributed because you had to keep the powder safe and dry. You couldn't have it open to the elements of the sea air and salt, moist, and it was bad enough that the lower in the ship there was always water in the bilge, so your powder magazine had to be up a couple levels and contained, you know. So it's a little bit of a myth when you see fantasy movies like the Pirates of the Caribbean, where Jack Sparrow and other people are running around, and Jack's even makes the joke about his pistol only having the one shot, no extra powder, and well, there wasn't any powder in the pan either. So how would that gun have ever gone off? But
right. Oh, one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when they are like, pointing the flintlock at somebody and the frizzen is already open.
right,
Which
it
how
won't
it
strike
works
it.
is the flints, it won't strike it. So I hate that. It's like, come on, somebody have a little attention to detail. And like newer movies, I can see it, but like some of, even like in the 90s, you see it open. I'm like, what are you
Well,
gonna
and
do?
sometimes, and you just that should be the fault. I mean, the person who's their armor advisor on the show should catch that. You would hope that the DP, the director of photography, would be knowledgeable enough to get that. You would hope that the actor themselves would be knowledgeable enough to get that. But I guess when it comes down to it, it's really not. And there's so many other things going on. It's like, it's always one of those things that fascinates me is the continuity editing issues that occur in films because of the way they've shoot it. And, one of my favorite films, Braveheart, is the worst. There's so many continuity editing problems, but people get busy doing other things and they just don't catch it. It's like, and until going to digital, film was so expensive that it's like you can't afford to reshoot a scene
to redo it,
either money wise or time wise. So anyway,
it's true. Kind of in closing, I want to ask this. I know your wife makes a lot of your clothing. Is that correct?
Yep.
Your pirate clothing. Okay. So whether it's like a prop or a costume or a blade or whatever, what is, and this is kind of like choosing your children, what's one of your favorite things you've made or had made for you?
As far as my costumery is concerned?
Sure, yeah. Well, costume or prop, like from any of the Disney stuff. I mean, like, what's like one of the most proudest things that you've created or had created?
Oh my God. What is one of my proudest things? I don't know, John. That's really hard to come up with as I look around this room, for example, because
Yeah, I mean it's literally like picking your favorite pet or your favorite
yeah,
child.
it's
So.
like it's really difficult because it goes everywhere from just my design work. Like this is my favorite knife. It's a long knife that I designed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't make it.
It's pretty.
Someone else made it
Right.
come to life, but it was my design. This is a white-tailed deer antler, which acts as a striking tine on this knife. Also, this deer was from Oregon, and the spacer that's added here, because I had that originally as brass. My buddy that made this is in Georgia, and he called and said, Can I use another piece of antler to do that spacer? And he matched it up well with the groove line and everything. Naturally, this is from a whitetail in Georgia. So this knife has 2 deer in it from 2 different places of the country. I didn't make it my design. Of course, I made the sheath because I do all my own leather work, like I did to all of these. I designed this knife, which is Rebecca's. This is Damascus with a ray skin. Octopus guard.
Beautiful. I love the octopus guard. That's gorgeous.
So that's another design. But as far as things I've made that I'm most proud of, I'm really proud of my skull stands that I use for my hats.
Oh, I was gonna bring that up. Those are
and
so
the fact
amazing.
that they've gotten so much better over the years. Things get better with time. I'm just looking. I can't. This side of the desk is cut off because I got stuff piled here. But I got.
Yeah, your skull stands are just.
But I love doing.
Cool.
I love doing those because those are my creation from start to finish. I mold the skulls are molded. They're polyurethane cast.
Yeah.
And I used to just do them so that they had regular. My mold has the teeth in them, but after I mold them, I cut all the teeth off, and I use real, fake, real fake dental teeth. I use a tooth set that I get through dental supply, and I replace all the teeth and the missing ones that I missed. But it's in the painting again, getting the layers and layers of the wash on the polyurethane resin to get it to do the correct, what I find is the realistic bone, look. So the skull stands are one of my most proud. I'm really proud of a lot of the things, a lot of the hats that I make. Several of them are my own styles. They didn't exist in history. The MacKay bifurcated tricorn that has the front like this. It was in Pirates of the Great Salt Lake, and things like that.
But it's so cool to have that variation because it's like anybody can get those, just basic fold up.
Well, what's neat, I find neat about it is I used to get bunched up about it a little bit, my panties in a wad, because I would see other people show up and I would know I didn't make that hat because I was the only person that made them, and I knew how many I had made. And you get to a point where the way you do things is a certain way, and so somebody else's is close but not exact, right? And I'd be like, where'd you get that hat? And they would tell me, and then I would immediately fire off an email to whoever the other person was and said, look, that's my design. I'm a small business. Cease and desist making that hat, right? And for the most part, I had two guys that I'm friends with now in the pirate community that were like, yeah, no, sorry, man, I didn't mean to step on any toes. That's your intellectual property, no problem. And then I had a third who still sells it. Instead of calling it the MacKay, he calls it the Captain or the something. He's got some name for it. And I contacted him and I was like, look, I'd appreciate it if you didn't make that. That's my intellectual property. And he's like, no, you don't have any copyright on that. There's no copyright on clothing. You can't copyright that. It's like, this is America, free enterprise, capitalism, fuck you, basically. He literally, he's like, I was like, well, I'll sue you. And he goes, you can't sue me, fuck you, kind of thing. And he still makes it and calls it something else, and that's fine. And I've just kind of gotten used to that. What I really like, though, now is for example, the artwork, the conceptual artwork came out for Pirates 2 and 3. And Miles Teves, who's a friend now, put his conceptual artwork. 2 of his drawings had a pirate with a bifurcated front, and it didn't end up in the movie or anything. But so it started being copied into art, and not just shitty art, but good art by a good artist. Someone doing conceptual art for Disney, and then. It showed up on, someone did a painting of a skeleton holding a flintlock that he's shooting, and it's got the bifurcated hat. And then a tattoo came out, and the skeleton had the bifurcated hat. And then a coin got minted, and it had the bifurcated hat. And so all these little things are feeding into the world and into the collective unconsciousness, and something that I put out there has now made it into other people's art, and that's, I find, actually pretty cool. And so I'm having less of a problem with people copying than I used to. And again, I think maybe that's me growing a little older, but it's fun every time something else pops up. Oh, and just the other day, one came up that's a cutesy. It's a little girl riding a dragon as a pirate. The dragon's tail is forming the mast, and she's up on top of it like a crow's nest, and she's got a bifurcated hat on. And I'm like, that's
awesome.
That's really cool. But I don't know, other things there's so many things that I'm really proud of. I'm proud that I built the bar. Our kitchen is Pirates of the Caribbean theme. We don't eat, since there's the 3 of us, we don't eat at a kitchen table. We eat in the living room, in the Haunted Mansion room, at our coffee table, but we can eat at the bar. The bar is Pirate Bar. It's 2 whiskey barrels with a wood top that I finished and clear coated. I took an old china cabinet, took the doors off of that. It's black. We made that Pirates of the Caribbean theme. It's got the ride plaque above it. It's got some pirate awards on it. It's got collectibles on it. I got a Jack Sparrow collectible cabinet on the wall over here, and then Disney stuff. And there's a cannon, and there's a full-size figurehead of a mermaid, busty mermaid, and just, so it's Pirates of the Caribbean room, and we redid the floor dark wood and dark back door, and so it's all dark wood and very atmospheric. And it's in a few things. It's in Wild and I did a dead parrot sketch, Monty Python. I think I mentioned it in the first one. That was shot in our kitchen, Pirates of the Caribbean bar. I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the way the living rooms turned out with the built-in and the fireplace and the stuff.
If you ever get to do a video tour, let me know. I would love to see
and
it.
A lot, so. We will. And a lot of that I'm just proud of, that Rebecca and I get to create together as a family. And like I said, the bathroom is Jungle Room Cruise, and we always agree on the palette, the color palette, and the fixtures and all that stuff. And I have a mermaid. I have a Fijian type mermaid. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Fiji mermaid. Tom Keebler made. Tom's a good friend of mine. Tom lives here in Newark, Ohio. Tom Keebler, sculptor of the Bazaar, who's done the Frankenstein head. He does a lot of work for Guillermo del Toro's museum.
Del Toro.
And
That's crazy.
Oh,
That's
it was
awesome.
crazy when I found out Tom was actually in Newark. I was like, this is crazy. And so I get to
Yeah.
go over to his place and look. And Tom's got one of the best collections of human skulls that I've ever seen.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and just amazing, amazing stuff. And that he's done for Guillermo del Toro and some other clients that I can't mention yet because he's not allowed to mention them yet. But
Yeah.
in any
Yeah.
case, why did I go to Tom? Oh, I have a Fijian mermaid that I made, and that one I made from one of the cheap skeletons that they
Mhm.
sell at some of the
Yep.
places. Like this little guy that I did this little imp. He started out as a skeleton and
Yeah.
just changed.
And I love that you can like still see the rib
I
bones through the.
know. It's like he's got
I
his little
love that.
jammies on. He's got his little devil
I
outfit
love
on.
it.
He's a demon that wears a little demon costume, but
That's so awesome.
and little make one eye a little bit bigger than the other one, kind of makes things
Yeah.
a little bit crazy. That was a trick Tom does that I
That's
learned.
so cool.
But so the Fijian mermaid, I really like that. I'm really impressed with that. This guy, I did a demon he's black that has longer ears and he's downstairs.
Yeah.
Cats keep knocking him off the thing and I keep having to repair him. It's been repaired about 50
Oh no.
times. But things like that. I mean, I like some of the things that I've done that are bigger projects, like our Honda Element. It was Mickey Mouse Disney before, but then I decided to go full on. We made it. There's pictures on my Facebook and on the web and stuff, but we went full on
Mhm.
Mandalorian on it. I
Nice.
raptor hided the whole outside a battleship gray, military spec battleship gray, which is like a bed liner. So it's all extra
Yeah.
protected. And then I did Child Protective Services, Mandalorian Child Protective Services with the stylized Grogu on the door.
Yeah.
And uh, on the side, it says, "This is the way" in Mandalorian script. It had Stormtrooper
Nice.
head count on the front quarter panels. On the back in Mandalorian, it said, "Don't come on my car," because it was getting so
Uh,
much attention and people were saying so much stuff.
yeah.
In Mandalorian, it says, "Don't come on my car," and people never know what that is. It had the old trucker symbol that they used to put on mud flaps and stuff of the busty
Yeah.
chick that was ass, gas, or grass. Nobody rides for free.
Right.
I did I did a stylized version of that where she wears a Mando helmet and has engineer boots on, and that was on the gas cover. Just
Yeah.
and one where Mando is walking hand in hand with Grogu from the back, and Grogu's carrying a balloon, and the helium balloon is a Mickey Mouse head, so
Yeah.
it had my little hidden Mickey on it. So we had all this thing, and then the interior was all done out Mandalorian too, and so that was fun. I mean, we had the the uh, the fobs, the
Yeah.
fobs hanging from the rear view mirror, and I had the
Mhm.
explosion pucks on the dash, and I had just everything was all
That's
Mandalorian, and
so
it
cool.
and the roof rack said uh, Star Wars, the Mandalorian, big across the front of it,
Yeah.
and then the side things had individual little scenes from the Mandalorian. So but it was all gray with black. Everything was done in black, all
Right.
the details. And so it was really cool. And I even mounted the big 60 caliber blaster on the roof rack. Um,
Love it.
so that was real fun. And I really liked that project. And it got a lot of attention. And it did a couple car shows here in Ohio and Newark.
Yeah.
There was somebody that had a white Stormtrooper Jeep, and we would park, side by side. And so that got some attention, and I really loved that project. It lasted 4 years, and then it was like kind of getting tired of it at that point. Only because, you know, it was at just this past year, we were actually kind of getting a little worried about being noticeable and trying to fly a little bit lower under the radar in red state than otherwise. So we were like, let's tone this down a little bit. And luckily we had the contract from Rust-Oleum, and we just took Rust-Oleum 2X, not ultra cover. Anyway, use Rust-Oleum, plug for Rust-Oleum 5-in-1. It's got 5 different nozzles on it. If you've never used it, it's really cool for spray painting because you can control how that paint comes out.
Yeah.
So we used it on the car and just went over the Raptor hide that was dark gray and painted it all black. So it's all just a flat black Honda Element now. So anyway, lots of things. I don't know. There are lots of things that I love that I've done. I did a skull for a customer that was the skull of Flint in Disney's Treasure Planet.
Oh yeah.
There's Flint is a reptilian creature that has 3 sets of eyes.
Right.
And I built that skull for him.
That's
and
cool.
I did it off of
That's cool.
Taking a coyote skull and then building from there to elongate the head and create the 3 sets of eyes, and had to redo all the dental for that, thin out the jaw and the lower jaw, and that was fun. That was a fun one. It was a skull stand. And some things like I did when I get special. This is Sea of Thieves hat.
Oh,
and I made it for someone. They wanted it big.
That's so cool.
I don't know if you've ever played that game or you know that game, Sea of Thieves.
I have not played it, but I've seen like the playthrough stuff.
But made this hat, and then they got it, and they decided that it was too big. And so I had to remake it, and I ended up with that one. And it was only because I felt bad. I mean, normally I don't remake things like that. If someone custom orders something, we have a pretty good idea of what it is before we make it. And if I make it, it's made. That's the deal.
That's the deal. Yeah.
But the person it was for was a special needs individual, and they thought it exacerbated, or they would bring too much attention. And so I said, okay, I understand where you're coming from on that, and we'll redo it. So, but anyhow, cool. there's so many, like you said, they're like babies. There's so many things that you've done, and I can't think of half of them.
Well, the thing that I think is so cool that you said is like, we're creating stuff as a family, and I mean, that's a huge deal. So I love that. And I love that for all of you guys.
I appreciate that. And thank you for that. I really think I know how blessed I am, and that we are blessed as a family. I see lots of people who do events and things like that, and one or the other of the partners, wife, husband, whatever, is there doing something because they're being forced to do it, or they're acquiescing to, they do love their partner, and that's why the only reason they're doing it. But you can tell that that's the only.
But their heart's not
you can tell their heart's not in it, and that's the only reason they're doing it. And I understand and appreciate how lucky we are, because we do love doing it together, and we do love all the stuff that we create. And we, every day, whether it's, for Rebecca's, Rebecca is still a content creator, and she has her own Patreon that's Rebecca Fantasy Model, where she does fantasy burlesque, which is kind of like cosplay. There's never any naughty bits in it, but we are very good at having done this for 8 years or whatever, at getting very nice pictures where nothing is shown, but so it is burlesque, and it's and
Right.
and we've done so many different Star Wars with her, and we have to create the backgrounds and the weapons, the props. She has to do the costumes.
Yeah.
We've done pirates so many different times. We've done, Easter Bunny different ways for 6 years. We've done Valentine's Day different ways for 6 years, and New Year's,
Yeah.
every holiday different for 6 years, Christmas and everything. And so
Yeah.
it's really something where every day, whether it's getting ready for that, because she does that 2 times a month, they come out on the 1st of the month and the 15th, and whether it's that, or whether it's content for my Patreon, or content for my TikTok, which is mostly DIY stuff and how to upgrade things.
I'm not on TikTok, but I need to get on it, I guess, because everybody's on TikTok now.
I've had the most success at TikToks. I'm at 380 whatever thousand followers on TikTok, wow. And it's at a point where we're some of the people that are affected by if there is a TikTok ban, and they're talking about it leaving again in 2 weeks. So
of course they are.
Who knows what's going to happen, but we do make money off of TikTok by number of views, and we make money off of representing some of the products that we advertise on TikTok, and then we get a little kickback, like cat water fountains. We've sold a ton of cat water fountains. We get a tiny little bit, but
nice.
where I was going with that is every day we spend all our day, we're a family that we get to spend all our time together. Wild was homeschooled. Rebecca's his homeschool teacher. So we're, as a family, we're here all the time together, creating together, and we're always bouncing ideas off and soundboarding stuff and figuring things out together. And we know that we're lucky in that respect. And it is awesome. And it's like, and I feel sometimes I'm embarrassed saying it because I feel like I'm bragging about how awesome it is. But I don't mean to say that to anybody to say like my life's better than theirs or anything, but I realize and I understand how lucky I have it. So
yeah.
Cancer aside.
Great. Yeah. Jeff,
thank you
so much for being part of this. I just absolutely love talking to you, and I'm sure we'll meet at person.
We probably will at some point. And
absolutely.
And if you need names of other pirates that are in the Texas area, let me know. I got a lot of customers in Texas, and people that I know are good people and are on the same wavelengths. So.
All right. That sounds great. Well, we'll come to a close now, but again, you're welcome back anytime.
We'll have to plan it for a little bit longer break this next time. I really enjoyed doing both of them, and I can't wait for them to come out so that the family can hear about it.
Absolutely.
So that'll be fun. And I'll be on again.
Well, yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
I love it. Awesome. So until next time, I am John, and this has been Jeff MacKay, and we've loved having him, and we'll see you in the next episode.